All right. Let's go ahead and jump right in. I know we only got 45 minutes. The topic today is balancing compliance and true security. But what we really wanted to talk about is a little bit of a bigger subject. The problem, clearly, you've heard from many people that the problem is getting harder. But unfortunately, what a lot of people don't talk about is the resources aren't getting more abundant. Right? So you have to start making hard decisions about what you invest in, how you invest it. Instead of taking the traditional approach of somebody just saying, yeah, just spend more. Clearly, that's not an option, especially in almost every vertical. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the balancing of what is kind of true compliance versus true security. But with the advent of changes in architecture and the environments that we're dealing with, there's a lot of interesting issues that have been introduced. So that's really what we want to talk about today. So quickly, to introduce myself, my name is Nathan Shanks. I'm responsible for our security outsource business at CenturyLink. So I'm directly responsible for our externally facing clients. There's a difference between corporate security, CenturyLink, and our consumer or business-oriented security services. So my teams service and protect your and other environments, if it's effectively your environment and our environment, but outside of the scope of kind of core CenturyLink. So some of the stuff you already know. Some of the stuff I like to highlight. I mean, one of the things, maybe just a quick show of hands, how many people owned a computer in the 90s? Almost everybody. What's interesting about a computer in the 90s is the amount of knowledge and skill necessary to use that device. You generally had to know what how much memory you had. You tended to run into size and issues with the device. But typically, there was still turbo buttons and a tremendous amount of complexity that went into the installation, configuration, and the networking of these technologies. Today, everybody in this room very likely has a phone that's more powerful than some of the fastest supercomputers in the early 90s. You can update firmware, you refresh your operating system every 3 weeks. You install very complex applications that interface at an unbelievable rate with a number of tools that is even unfathomable for a computer in the 90s. Unfortunately, the enterprise security strategy largely hasn't changed. We still have very similar architecture, we have very similar distribution systems. So the big thing here is everyone keeps saying how complex everything has gotten. I actually argue the opposite. The things you can do with the power that's in your pocket has actually become simpler, more accessible. More people have it, more people can do things about it. So the exploitation kits and things are now become they have become monetized. You can sign up for a subscription to get the latest exploit kit, pay $800–900 a month, and have effectively your run at anybody that hasn't patched their systems in the last 2 to 3 months. Regardless of who you'd like to go to as kind of a threat source, whether that be the Verizon breach report, the Juniper report, the Qualys report, pick one that you enjoy. Every one of them says over 95%, it's 95 in the Qualys report, it's 99.8 in the Verizon report, all of them say the same thing. 90+% of all exploits occurred against an exploit that had a patch available for longer than 9 months. What this tells me is not that we need more sophisticated technology and more sophisticated infrastructure, and even more infrastructure. We need to be solving some basic problems first. Single sign-on, it took the FBI $1.8 million in a contractor to break a single iPhone. Why? When you interface with it, you don't have 60 credentials, you don't have a password safe that you use. They used a very simple idea. It's called single sign-on, properly implemented PKI. And it took $2 million to break a single phone. Moving the cost of the exploit out of the realm in a regular business. People aren't going to spend $2 million to steal data worth less than $2 million. Right? Pretty straightforward principle. So customization of malware. These packages and kits, when you hear about them, they sound unbelievably sophisticated. Unfortunately, they're also downloadable on basically any source media and anybody that has access to the internet now. So you may absolutely agree that a lot of these environments are incredibly complex. Unfortunately, high schoolers have access to install things that would otherwise require an entire nation state to build. So you've got to lower the value of the targets. So the things that I just mentioned, if it costs $2 million to break a single phone, if your surface area is actually hardened to a reasonable level, most of the time people will move on. Unless you're targeted, then good luck. There's a tremendous amount of energy spent on focused individual attacks, and we obviously try to figure out how to combat that threat. As a telecommunications company, we're certainly not the most loved universal business, so we face that every day as well. So the outsourcing of information, we're going to get into a lot of this as the presentation goes on. I promise we'll talk about this a little bit more. I get it. It's way easier to buy SaaS. It's way easier to use CRM in the cloud. It's way easier to use the cloud infrastructures. It's in a lot of cases, speed to the market, capabilities, availability. There's 100 operational reasons why you should move and consider these types of projects. You shouldn't do it without considering the implications of it, though. And we see more and more of our client base, they have to jump to it for an operational reason, and then 9 months later they realize that they have no ability to have the same visibility they even had 9 months ago. They've actually put themselves in a worse situation. So who's targeting you? Right? So again, I'm not going to get into professionals. You're going to hear that from basically every security company in the industry, that there's this giant nation state. It's completely true. Whenever the CSO of CenturyLink talks, he terrifies me literally every time he talks. There's a lot of really sophisticated, extremely well-funded bad guys out there, and you do need to have that on your mind. The reality is, there's a lot of other people that not enough people are talking about. The hacktivists, right? The people that want to do it just for the sake of doing it. The interconnected networks. One of the things I like to tell people, we track as a company major catastrophes on a digital age. Since January of this year, there have been 6 of them. Major catastrophes in the digital age. Meaning taking out entire regions that were unrecoverable for hours, days, or potentially weeks. In those 6, certainly there were some that you heard about in the news and were recognized by the industry. One that you didn't hear about in the news was a 16-year-old that was targeting his high school for getting a 4th grade in mathematics. He was popular in social media. He invoked one of the largest denial of services the United States has seen in over 5 years. That is not a nation state. That is not a problem you can solve with threat intelligence. This will always happen. The problem is we put this ability of interconnecting all the humans on the planet together in one central place, and then give them access to some unreal technology that you can literally just swipe around with. So, people driven by cost. There's also reasons why they would want to get into your environment, to either change the outcome of something, update something. There was a steel company, we remain nameless. The steel company had a very large vested interest in making sure that the tariffs on steel went to their direction when it comes to competing with international steel businesses. They were infiltrated only to know who the arbitrator was that was going to oversee their court case. They sat on their network for 18 months waiting for the legal team to decide who within the United States would do arbitration, so they could file a injunction against it to make sure it leaned in the right direction. This had nothing to do with stealing video files or documents. 18 months. Education or change, right? Sometimes people actually want to influence decisions made. Sometimes want a smart grid project. When you sit down with those folks, they're not sitting around wondering if they can interconnect devices, and most of that technology is very well established, very well known, very well baked. We have practical diagrams and architectures and structures. We know how it all works. What we're more concerned about is making sure that environment stays secure and people can't access things like metering in homes, changing the impact of water pressure in downstream systems. Right? You can influence now practical, real-world, kinetic elements. I like to talk about the amateurs too, because there's very practical cases of this. I joke about your ex. How many people have either felt like they should or would want to Facebook stalk someone? One of my favorite stories here is there's a brigadier general, fantastic man. He was given a presentation about 9 months ago at one of the little baby cons. And I took the story from him. When he was enlisted, 25 years, Army, he wanted to make sure to protect himself against cyber threats. So he decided to not be part of social media. He didn't want to be fished or tracked in the online social media world. So luckily for him, somebody else decided to create his profiles on Facebook, LinkedIn, and literally MySpace. Not joking. They got a picture of him. Obviously, he's a general. Relatively easy to do, right? And then they went around and started friending people. I don't know how many people would say no if the general of your command sent you a request on LinkedIn to join his LinkedIn network. I don't know how many people deny that request on the incoming. 3 years, this individual grew and grew and grew, had over 2,000 LinkedIn references, had 3,000 friends on Facebook, was able to actually infiltrate base locations, logistics, all kinds of things, pretending to be this gentleman. Then eventually somebody asked him in the office what made him decide to get into the social media world, because they actually targeted him because he had such a massive following. To his surprise, he never actually had joined any social media network. This is a very real thing. Just because you're not there doesn't mean somebody else won't do it on your behalf and go through the process. This does not require a nation state. This does not require an $80 million research budget. It's a very practical thing you could go home right now and actually implement. So tracking and the ability to monitor this type of activity requires a different type of surveillance, requires a different type of attitude, a different type of action that you're going to take to protect yourself. There are lots of people that are seeking attention. I don't know if anybody's heard of Twitch. It's an entire network. Over 80,000 subscribers pay more than $5 a month to watch other people play video games. This is a real thing. The company makes almost $100 million a year with subscriptions for someone to watch somebody else play a video game. That's attention. That is an attention-motivated element. Twitch was actually targeted for a very significant threat because imagine if you could sway not just the dollars, but the attention. Media giants hope to have 80,000 subscribers looking at one particular thing, so attentive, let alone some random person that's really good at Warcraft. Right? It's a different era. It's a completely different problem we're trying to solve. So what are they trying to actually get? Again, you've heard it. Counterintelligence is important. I just brought up a couple really important examples of that. Policy, governance, and insight of what's going on. Again, mentioning a few of those examples. International visibility. The one I like to talk about is humanitarian oversight. I just gave an incredible amount of power to a community of people, and a lot of those people actually have a lot of good intentions, actually. You may want to know if a particular charity is over or underspending. How does money get routed one way or the other? You may want to donate to a charity you actually believe in and want to find out what they're doing with those resources. Up until now, it was largely impossible. It's now publicly available, right? You may want to actually change or influence businesses, communities, and counties. Curiosity, online stalking is a huge issue, right? This doesn't just happen from one person in North Carolina to another person. You now have access to 900 million subscribers on Facebook. There are 900 million people interconnected with the same protocol, same standard, same search engine, same API. When in history was there 900 people directly accessible to a regular person without even an account? Hasn't happened. So financially, you get it, right? One of the things a lot of people don't realize is of the old, right? So I actually reminisce quite a bit about the early 2000s because security was really easy, relatively stupid most of the time. We were putting in basic firewalls and thought we were protecting ourselves. The worms, people would write these worms, they would drove through, knock ATMs and stuff over, and you could track them with just idiot logic that would be like something enumerating something else. Here it is, protected, kick it off and go nuke something, right? It was like the equivalent of just going in and be able to just blast a bunch of missiles at something. It was very easy to find, very easy to see. The detection systems we were building, relatively not very sophisticated. What a lot of people don't realize is people are actually stealing credit cards not for the reason of taking them, because your credit card companies have gotten really, really good at sending you a new credit card the second that thing is detected. Actually, it's not because they want to, it's because they're regulated to do so. You receive a brand new credit card in the mail, you're like, fantastic. Can anyone tell me why the most common source, or the most common reason why people try to steal medical records in 2016?
Social Security number.
Social Security number's good.
False tax returns.
Tax returns. False identity. You generate from those two things. The number one reason to break into and steal a medical record is to not know anything about you, not care who you are, what you do, or what ailments you might have. I can literally generate an American passport in any country in the world with your medical record. Just as if you were in that country and needed help and assistance. I can create bridges between places. How much is that worth monetarily? People's lives, their livelihoods, everything. How much energy do people spend trying to get across the border in Mexico or float across the ocean to the UK? They will literally risk their lives, every ounce, every nickel, every dollar, everything they have. And what if I could give you a piece of paper to let you walk across, get on a plane, and just go in? medical records are not just worth 25 cents a number, which is what a credit card is worth in the dark web. A medical record can be worth anywhere between $10,000 and $150,000 in the open market, because it's literally that powerful. How would the State Department know any different? If I know everything about you, I'm effectively you in the digital age. So let's talk about IoT. I'm going to come clean. I love IoT. I love it. I'm an early adopter. I had one of the first thermostats. I have light switches in my home. I have a closed loop network that allows me to control my lights in my house. It is super convenient. It wasn't me that got addicted, to be totally honest with you. My wife got addicted to it first. I had this thermostat downstairs on the second floor. It was a pain in the neck. You had to go downstairs and turn down the temperature at night, turn it back up in the morning, or whatever combination of that you like. As soon as we got it on the phone, you could just sit there in bed and change the temperature, 1, 2, 3. Then all of a sudden, you start thinking about everything else. What about the lights? I'm gonna turn the lights off in the whole house when I leave. I don't have to go around into all those switches. Man, that's annoying. I got sucked in. I got pulled in just like everyone else, right? My garage door opener. Actually, I recently ordered a garage door opener that's connected to my network. And you're saying, that's a security guy? It's super convenient. And more and more and more, it's becoming even more convenient. So we recently had, this week, a pretty significant attack related to it. And this isn't just a anomaly thing. We've got Samsung, GE, Apple, Google just made a huge play into the market. Amazon's been operating in this for years. This is not like some random startup in Silicon Valley is coming up with one technology. GE, the last number I saw, plans on building over 1.2 billion smart switches in 2017. I could ask you a question. If you're going to build a billion of anything, especially when each unit costs $12 each, what's your patch strategy? What's the patch strategy on the pen sitting on the desk in front of you? Non-existent. It's free. You're not going to put together a giant infrastructure to patch all of your light switches. How frequently have you updated the light switches in the home that you own? My house, 25 years ago, when I started putting them in. How many technology stacks have survived more than 10 years, legitimately, without an update, not a single patch? I feel like everything I have now gets updated every 2 weeks, and you're used to it because you have your $600 phone and a giant security company in the background going, let's cram it down their throat and make them do it. How frequently does that happen on your light switches? The truth is never. It will literally never happen. The DDoS that we recently experienced was somebody that was taking advantage of somebody that was mass producing IoT devices, targeted a core internet infrastructure device, and was able to take it offline. Why would they target your laptop or your phone or anything that has all this crazy cool security technology on it? That wouldn't make any sense. We got these fully unpatched light switches, thermostats, beaconing all over the internet. Doesn't make any sense to write some super expensive, super sophisticated exploit for any of the things that Microsoft is trying to combat against. There's too much memory management, memory control, and all that. Blah. Let's just go after something, an unpatched equivalent to a Windows NT system sitting on 3 million devices, which I can scan and access because now I have access to the entire internet. That's why. So we talked about why the people want it, largely for the same reasons. Convenient, operationally, it was fantastic. Talked to a construction company, recently the 3rd largest in the world. They say on average, their new job sites, these guys do big stuff, dams, giant facilities, they build new bridges, repair big bridges. Their average job site now has 2 million IoT devices on each location. You're like, literally when they said that, my face just looked like all your guys. I was like, 2 million of what? I'm not gonna have 2 million worse. Like, this is a job site. He's like, listen, when you tip over a bucket of gravel, there's a gyroscope with an IoT device on it transmitting how much gravel just got poured out of that bucket. Right in front of the fuel injector on all their dump trucks, IoT device is transmitting how much fuel that dump truck is using, which one needs to be serviced first. Every time they lift a ladder, there's a gyroscope to make sure that it's in a safe position so somebody doesn't fall off the roof. The foreman has complete control of the input and output. They pre-order gravel before they even know they're out of it. For all the right reasons, we did this. So let me tell you a little anecdotal stories. Like, what's really funny about this, we got all excited about all the stuff, site, like saving millions. Then all of a sudden, a competitor's dump truck comes rolling by the job site. Most IoT technology is what they call a mesh network. It's fully trusting. As long as I'm close enough to you from a radius standpoint, you're going to join my mesh. We're going to now know each other, we're friends, we're going to communicate with one another. Dump truck comes rolling by, spread directly to their competitor's site. In a matter of minutes, they had access to completely inappropriate information about their enemy's operation. And then he said the light went off. They see exactly the same thing on us. So you can do some really cool stuff. But what happens if somebody uses that for the wrong reasons? Unlocking doors, ensuring you're not home, right? Got a motion sensor, it's pretty easy to now find it, it's on the internet, whether it's open or closed, I can do that remotely. Camera tagging, finding out what's for dinner, dropping out unannounced, hopefully the in-laws don't get access to that one. But everything from flooding your yards, there's real world practical examples of a lot of the stuff. Actually, one of the largest early adopters of IoT technology has these great things that let you mechanically turn dials and switches, right? One of the first practical automation things you want to do is water your lawn. Everyone's got one of the little timer deals. What if it rains? That sucks. Don't water your lawn when it rains. You'd relatively want a smart device that would not turn on your sprinkler for rain. Very, very popular products. Again, how much of a patch strategy do you really think the whole world put together when they put this together? So compliance matters. Listen, it matters. Every time I give this in front of security people, they always snicker. Like, compliance is security. I disagree. We should be designing the right solution and mapping that back to our compliance requirements. We should protect ourselves and ensure our regulators let us continue to operate, okay? Somebody out there cares what you do, and you need to make sure they're satisfied that you're doing it to the level that you need to be. I think that's an incredibly important part of our society, let alone an individual business. Compliance allows other people to understand what we do. Do not overdo it. It's what people get trapped in this analysis. Some people actually get caught into the trap thinking that their compliance organization is actually keeping them secure. And that is not true. The federal government has proven that over and over and over. Anyone remember the opium breach? Seemed like it just got swept under the rug. I've had a clearance for the better part of a decade. Whoever downloaded that 4 terabytes of data took mine and every other classified individual's entire life history down in a single poll. They're the most compliant agency in the federal government. Do you think I care? I care what control that they enforce. I care a lot they know about my entire life, but not much how compliant they were. So the proper security is very important. So some of the security stuff. So a lot of people come to us and say, okay, great, you say all that. Listen, my budget's getting tighter, my regulators are getting more annoying. That's life. So we talked about this a little earlier, 99% of the attacks are things from, and actually again, the Verizon report was a little bit more egregious. This is something like 180 days or something that somebody sits on your network and it was over a year-old patches. We're not solving basic problems still. And this is the farthest from a sales pitch I can get. If you're going to spend resources on something, anything, spend it on a structured single sign-on system and focus on your patch policy. It will address 99% of exploitation that will occur over the next 6 months, doing those 2 basic things. Now, you probably already own the infrastructure. Every customer we go to, actually, it's even the opposite. Typically, we go in, they've got like 3 different tools to do it. They have like 16 different directories, thinking that's like a smarter way to do it. Because it's unmanageable, completely untenable. You can't end up solving some of those problems. These are some of the areas we want to look at. Identity management is incredibly powerful, that's why it's a very fast-growing market space. After you get through some of these baseline types of issues, there are some really, really amazing things you can do to protect yourself and prevent a lot of things that I've been talking about. But do the basic stuff first. So last time I gave this presentation, it was actually in a survey. It was about 380, 400 people, all representing a variety of different industries and verticals. And when I clicked on this slide, before this slide came up, even before I explained what I just said, the poll asked, how many people in this particular presentation feel that they have a comfortable or confident control over their patch management system, or have some idea how compliant all of their core systems are within their network. 68% of people said, I had no idea. There were three options. I'm good. I'm pretty good. No clue. 68%, absolutely no clue. No idea what was going on, had no idea what was going to happen. So the mistake we see over and over and over as a company, people come to us and say, you know what, I need like this cool, awesome, on-fire widget tool that's super rad and I'm going to implement it tomorrow. It doesn't work. If you haven't created your basics, that project is already failed before you started. Some of the examples I actually use, DLP, packet capture, and whitelisting products, all awesome. Actually, some of the most successful surveillance environments that we track have comprehensive DLP. But if you ask me, out of 100 projects, maybe 12 successful DLP deployments. Because unless you've solved those fundamental issues, the DLP solution is largely useless. So these are some things, critical mistakes that people often make. Before you try to put in a data policy tool, have a data policy. Say that again. Before you implement a data policy tool, have a data policy. I know it sounds kind of basic, but I'm telling you, 8 out of 10 of my conversations, we start there and they're like, what are you talking about? I'm just buying a thing. I'm just buying a new phone and I'm putting it on the network, right? And it's going to work just fine. Deploying packet capture, do it very selectively. There are some incredibly high value places that you can put capturing systems in place. I'm going to tell you where it is. It's on whatever edge you can actually monitor with the resources that you have. Now, you may have 500 locations. If you can't monitor 500 locations, do not buy it for 500 locations. It is only going to be valuable on the edge in which you can actually monitor or afford to monitor. The infrastructure is insanely expensive. It takes a really long time to do correctly. And even when it's up and running, the maintenance, it's kind of like owning a boat. You know the best boat? It's your friend's boat. If boat maintenance is like 20% of the cost of a boat, packet capture systems is like 40% of the cost of the platform. So if you think you can do a one-time buy of $1 million, put about a 40% year-over-year overhead to maintain it. Again, there are some fantastic use cases. We have some very successful customers with it, but you have to focus your attention on it and then grow it from that focus. So complicated or disorganized directory structures, this is a huge pet peeve of mine. Because every single time I boil it down, I talk to the policy person, I talk to the directory people, and I'm like, so why'd you do it? They're like, well, it's so much more secure this way. We've got this resource domain over here, we've got this resource, and they can't talk to each other. I'm like, they do talk to each other, just so you know. All they do is they create an account on both sides. Having complicated directory structures, and again, I thought we solved this 30 years ago, right? Everyone's like, oh, we're solving all this. Pretty straightforward, we've had tackle all these years. It isn't. You're not alone. Everybody has 12 complicated, annoying directory structures and 15 provisioning steps to get a user on board the network. Just consolidating one or two factors in this will help network traversal. It will prevent and stop people from jumping from one domain to another without your knowledge. You're not going to be able to log all of them. You're definitely not going to be able to store all the transactions for enough amount of time to create legitimate trends. And if you even begin to think about user behavioral analytics, good luck. If you've got even 3 directory structures, you try to rationalize even 1,000 users on 3 directory structures. We had one customer we brought in, we've got an indexing platform, all the data in, I think they have 50 or 60 domain controllers. And they're like, no, we're totally unified. Let's put this UVA thing on top. It's really sweet. Bolted it on. Every user had 5 to 6 different identities. What kind of analytics are you do? Yes, those 5 completely similar, but not similar, but kind of, well, are they the same people? I don't know. It's all good. The pilot went on for 90 days. We yielded very little out of it. If they would have thought about the directory strategy and focused on a single one, it would have been very successful. So second round, we learned this lesson. We focused on a particular tree that actually did a reasonable job. Simple directory stuff. This bullet is probably one of the most important bullets you're going to get throughout this entire presentation. Your data will be accessed. It will. Treat it that way. Be the person holding the keys. I am not advocating encrypting the entire world. It's inefficient, it's extremely expensive, it's even harder to manage. But I'm an advocate of finding the one or two things that you know, if that was taken, and this is an easier way to explain it to people too, because a lot of times you're talking to like all these IT technical guys and all these, you know, complicated data structures and block storage versus that versus that. I don't care about any of that stuff. If this X were to be released on the internet, Y bad would have happened to me. Whatever that is, whatever that complication is, that's what you should be spending your energy on, figuring out how to encrypt it, hold the keys and put that in a lockbox that nobody else. So even when they do successfully download it, because they will distribute it on the dark web, because they do all the time. You are the only person that has the authority to open up that information. And you will circumvent the entire process. No matter how insecure or unpatched your network are, if you ignore every other piece of advice I give and say, you know what, I can't do any of that stuff, it's just taking too long, too much energy, too much effort, find that one thing you know they were going to take and encrypt it. And it is hard. I know it's hard. It's one of the hardest things that we actually do. Finding the data policy, finding the thing that matters, it is hard. But a lot of energy should be spent on it. So this is another one of my pet peeves, and I know I keep jumping on and off the soapbox here for a minute. So I've been in the security space. My first job was in 1997. Again, I told you it was a little bit of a joke. It's called security, IT security. The first packet filter technology that I personally was involved in a project on was 1998. So far cry from the amazing technology we have in next-gen firewalls right now. But when it comes to security guys, I've used a mantra just like everyone else. I feel like every 5 years I put my foot in my mouth. I don't know why, it's probably just me. 5 years ago even, I would have said, you know, we're an insurance policy. We're insurance policies, we're important, so you don't get breached. We've been saying that literally since the foundation of security field. Did it work? Did insurance pay off? I mean, that's kind of a ridiculous insurance policy, right? We didn't pay out anything. These major exploits that the cyber insurance these major companies bought, Target only had $40 million in cyber insurance. $1.5 billion in losses. It's not an insurance policy, that's a joke. All that infrastructure, all that time, all that energy, and it's an insurance policy? It's not an insurance policy. If you're going to be going with a partner, or an outsourcer, especially, you should be asking the hard question. What is my ROI on this? Let's start talking about how I can accelerate your internet connection with a better quality assurance technology, which also happens to do other cool stuff. Protects you against malware. It may clean, you know, a phishing attempt or two. What about distributing your content more effectively to your entire constituent base, also providing DDoS protection at the same time? I'm not talking about going in and saying that there's not a perfect. Insurance is a very important industry. And there is certain elements. The data encryption part we'll get to is it's an insurance policy. Okay, that one is. I'll give it to you. The encryption thing, that's an insurance policy. You're going to pay for it. You're going to do it. It's going to be hard. Everything else you should evaluate against how important, how valuable is that thing. So, some compliance things that should address your IT mission. When I say, again, what is the ROI? I don't go to a company and say, you know what you really need is a really sophisticated IT threat monitoring system. We all know we need one of those. We can't afford one. That'd be great. But you do have to maintain some level of compliance. So why are these two things separate? Like, compliance generally says things like privileged access must be monitored. PCI, HIPAA, name it. Every physical control you're going to look at, right? Every rev of 853. GLIBA. There's a dozen references. COBITs. Everything says you need to monitor privileged access. So whatever compliance regulatory control you're working with. Now, you may be doing it in spreadsheets and, you know, printing files and putting it in file cabinets today, but one way or the other, you're compliant, right? Everybody, because anyone that takes a credit card is PCI compliant. Because they would have otherwise turned your machine off if you weren't. So you have something. Whatever that something is, you should be reaching across the aisle and saying, hey, compliance guy, what are you doing over here? You know what? We both did this together. Be faster, better, easier. All your reporting's taken care of. And oh, by the way, I'm not going to tell you, but there's a monitoring system. I'm not going to tell you about that part. And don't, too, because then they'll really want to know all about it. Reporting. Centralized reporting, everyone wants that, everyone would like that. Generally, we do a lot of decentralized compliance reporting. Again, another sale for a threat monitoring platform. That's literally what they're designed to do, is centrally report stuff. If you take the feature set of a modern outsourced SIEM platform, like a properly managed one, you go through your compliance check. We actually done this on several matrices for our clients. There's more than a dozen checkboxes we knock off immediately at a lower price point than trying to implement something yourself. Now, these are just two really important ones. Central administration, who's accessing what and where. That's also a component of having a properly managed and administered threat monitoring platform. If I put my true security hat on, all of a sudden I'm start saying the exact same thing to my compliance brother, and that's a pretty rare occasion. They may call it different things, like, oh, I have PCI DSS 3.2 and section 10.6 requires me to do X, Y, and Z. I'm like, great, that's just one use case. I have 150 other use cases I need to implement, but you know what, sir? I'll put that one in absolutely, and you'll get an email every time it happens. So this is the only salesy slide. I apologize. I like to include it here just to kind of give you a general sense of where our perspective of the world is. On the right-hand side, these are the products of old. We actually call legacy or core. Managed firewall, managed endpoint, managed tech, managed tech. To be a viable competitor in managed security services, we have to have these things. But what's interesting to me is in the last even 18 to 20 months, customers are not asking for a managed firewall. And let's take this back even further. Did you ever actually want a firewall? I never wanted a firewall. I frankly never even wanted a computer. We bought these things and we invested in them because we wanted to increase operational efficiency. We wanted to improve the function or job that we were performing. We didn't buy a firewall because we wanted one. Actually, firewalls we largely bought because we were told we had to have them. And then we started trying to figure out what we could do with them. Then we figured out a couple things. The problem is that we just kept buying these things, just these things stacking up on the desk. And maybe you got 85%, maybe you're in the minority, you get 85% productivity out of all of them. That's not the landscape today. Those are point products. You need those taken care of, and that's certainly an important thing to maintain their life cycle. But we don't see that going into the future. Things on the left are core services. Your network, my network, Azure, AWS, private data centers, closed-off data centers, federal, state, local, county, corporation. We're trying to solve fundamental problems. Fundamental problems. Things that you can buy one thing and it solves 5 compliance issues, 3 operational issues, and 4 overall fault isolation detection capabilities. Because your budgets aren't increasing, right? That's not happening. But what you are being asked to do is to consolidate a lot of these views into something. So that's what we see as the future. Is a lot of these services and products, instead of having 50 different unique individual systems, and we need a transition plan, right? We're going to go from that to this. We have 1,500 customers today that we're managing over 8,000 firewalls. Do you think any one of those customers wants a firewall? They never did. They still don't. So we're going to slowly migrate those over. Our biggest accounts today have actually already largely moved into most of these new services because what they really wanted was something at the end, not, the day-to-day. So let's break down this in the summary. Fix the things you can, encrypt everything else. You're going to walk away and say, you know what? Walk into your IT director and be like, oh, how's our patch management policy? And he's like, ugh. Like, all right, let's put together an assessment here real quick, figure out what data I need to protect. And that's probably the under-exaggerated expression you're going to get when you talk to them about it. Because what we thought was really simple, I'm telling you, it's not simple. That's why the whole world hasn't solved it. It's not you. Literally every company, 99% of all exploits, every company is facing this problem. So fix the things you can, do it as much as you can, and encrypt everything else. Single sign-on, encryption and access management. If you think things are hard now, start introducing some IoT in your network. And I'm not even going to talk about it because it's a dangerous word. We're not even going to mention IPv6 in this forum. But let's just pretend that doesn't exist for now. Just assume you're going to introduce at some point, not just the mobile phones and devices, but basically everything else in your office will be in some form or fashion connected to the internet. It's like 1/3 of all new HVAC systems that are being installed today are already connected to the internet out of the box. You don't even know. As soon as happening. Get the multiple groups involved for your projects. Get that compliance guy, rolls up into the CIO. They've always had the IT strings anyway. You can solve their problems. They really want you to solve their problems. You can get something out of it. you can buy security infrastructure that actually benefits both sides. Stay as compliant as you have to, and that's the end of it. Okay? Talked about that. It's important. It's very important. Keep those regulators as far away from your facility as humanly possible and be safe about it. But make sure you also can balance in security components. This next bullet is probably one of the most important for our outsourced customers. Don't jump into projects that you can't finish. And it's so tempting. I do it all the time. Like I'll go to a trade show or something, I'll be like super impressed with something. Like, oh man, I totally want to do that, I want to see that. And bring it inside, my engineers tear it apart, they look at it and be like, yeah, that'll take like 9 months and whatever, you know, X of dollars and all that. And I'm like, oh man, I'm trying to like weigh that out and figure it out. It's really easy to fall into that trap. You have to take a step back and ask yourself, do you need another firewall? You never actually needed that thing. Solve the business problem first. There are reasons to implement a lot of the technology that I've showed you today. I've seen some really unbelievable capabilities. Being able to cross-reference, you know, people being disgruntled to their productivity rates, into, you know, what they're using their devices for, into a behavioral analytics system, and finding out 3 days before somebody does something. That stuff's real. It's not just in the news or in the media. Like, it's real. But be prepared. If you want to go that path, go all the way with it. Make sure you have the resources to do it. Don't buy products, buy solutions. Again, that's kind of the mantra here. You may need a firewall in whatever you're trying to build. That may be a piece of it. Just buy an entire solution, not a piece of the product. There's way more people getting into the game. Just deal with it. It's life. Social media has caused it. Everybody has access to the internet today. You have more power in your pocket than you did 10 years ago by 1,000-fold. I have 4 cores on my phone. Who needs 4 cores on a phone? I'm like, well, I must be the most unpower user of a phone like in the entire world. I like walk by people and they're playing like these 3-dimensional racing games on their phone. I'm like, is that even a thing? Like, someone's driving this power, and it's not just used for cool games. These GPUs are turning into massive compute structures being disseminated across million iPhone banks with corrupted applications which can now literally take down your business from, you know, this podium. So the last point here, I guess, better said. If you have to focus on anything, only focus on the things that matter. And when you're spending money, always take in the back of your mind, if I buy this new firewall, will it also improve my operational efficiencies? As in, maybe QoS, denial of service protection, content distribution capabilities. Can I better interconnect my facilities? Can I improve my user communities? Focus on technologies that actually do more than one thing for you. It's going to be significantly more efficient, significantly more cost effective, and more importantly, you'll actually have a positive, you know, smiley face impact on your community. Because otherwise, all we're doing is we're adding another layer to another layer of another layer, and it's this constant losing battle anyway. You're not going to get ahead of it. Take a step back, buy solutions, and figure out which technologies you should focus most of your energy on. And that's my talk. Sweet cooler we're giving away, but any questions?
All right. Last week there was a DDoS attack.
They do. So the question was about the most recent denial of service that occurred against a DNS provider. So how many people even are familiar with what DNS is? All right, about half of us. So what I like to say, and I like to put this in context, right? The fathers of our internet were pioneered in the late 60s, early 60s. Between 1962 and 1968, pretty much all the protocols we use today were designed. Back then, it was a relatively trusted network. It was a trusted community, it was a trusted attitude towards computing. The importance of that is that literally everything that has followed to date, the reason there's 1,200 security vendors and everyone trying to rationalize and explain all this confusing stuff, is because a lot of these early protocols took your word for it. If I came up to you and said, hey, my name's Bill, you never met me before, you'd assume my name was Bill. Name services work very similar to this. If basically request something or you suggest something, it will believe what the suggestion was. This is fundamentally because the protocol, our communications between one another, was designed that way. So what actually happened? Somebody actually found an exploit that happened to be available on many of these IoT devices. A variety of thermostats, a variety of HVAC systems that were installed in businesses. Not just a few, it was actually millions. And then they said, what if we told all of these millions of random IoT devices sitting all over the world to send false information to one of the cornerstones of DNS, the name resolution services of the world. So I'm going to send a bunch of false. I'm going to tell you that everyone in the world's name is Bill. Literally everyone in the world's name is Bill. So when you come to ask for Netflix.com, in return you get the word Bill. They used a means of basically crushing a hosted provider. So Netflix was not getting denial of service. They were attacking the foundation of the protocol, this trusting system that we put in place that allow us to serve up content on a variety of people. You see all the people that were affected? They weren't affected. They use these trusting protocols. They use an infrastructure that we expect to always be truthful. And somebody said, you know what? I'm not going to write in an exploit for a phone or a computer is hard. Nowadays, the life cycle to write a new exploit is 6 weeks. And in some cases, a recent case study said it was almost $100,000 to write a 0-day. $100,000. There's not that many consumer-grade records even worth $100,000. And you have to monetize it in some way. So instead of writing for all that complicated stuff, let's use all that old, antiquated switches and thermostats sitting out there running with ancient code. Tell them to do something silly. It definitely put the world on notice. Right? People were not just sitting there going, I wonder if it could happen again. People are like, whoa, it hasn't happened yet? Like, this is the first time? I mean, are you kidding me? This is awful. That's why it hit, the news, CNN, large media, because this was not just I'm going to take out that network with some, sophisticated barrage of ICMP. This was, let's attack the foundation of the internet and these trusted protocols to inflict something on devices no one even knew existed. This is not Sony attacking Toyota. This was a group of, drones running in facilities and buildings, literally attacking the fabric of the internet. And that's why it was such a big deal. I don't think that's disclosed yet. Any other questions? All right, without further ado, come on up.
Who does not have a business card? Anyone?
Want to get your names in the raffle?
Actually, I'll just like pass.